Hey, this is Cam, and we're here for another episode of the Quarantine Series. I'm here with two dynamic YMCA CEO leaders, Tiffany Foxx and Rhonda Anderson. Tiffany, introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about where you're at and your career.
Sure. Like you said, I'm Tiffany Foxx. I'm the CEO of the Tuscarawas County YMCA in Dover, Ohio. I know most people want to know where that is, so I'm in a small community, but we're near Canton, Ohio. If you've heard of the Football Hall of Fame, that's usually a point of reference that people can at least recognize. I started my career, I was born and raised in Massillon, Ohio, so not too far from here. Started as a program director and was promoted to branch exec. Spent a good part of my time, about roughly 7.5, 8 years with the YMCA of Greater Dayton. Was a branch exec at two of the locations there, and then I've been here as a CEO for 3 years.
Great. Rhonda?
Thank you, Cam. And I'm Rhonda Anderson, and I have the privilege of serving as president and CEO of the YMCA of Greensboro. I have been here since January of 2020. Prior to that, I served as a COO of the YMCA Greater Charlotte for about 2.5 years. And then before that, CEO of the YMCA in New Jersey, which is now called the YMCA of Greater Monmouth County. Before that, I had a career with other large nonprofits, and then the corporate world. I worked for Johnson & Johnson and publishing company Simon & Schuster. I had the opportunity to join the Y in New Jersey about 8 years ago now. It's funny how time has flown by so quickly. And so certainly delighted to be here with you this afternoon, Cam.
Great. I'm getting to know Rhonda because she's the CEO in North Carolina with me, and I'm excited about her great things about Tiffany. So thank y'all both for being here today. You know, we've got to talk about social justice and the social unrest that's facing us, and we're, right on the heels of what's going on in Kenosha now. What role, Tiffany, maybe we can start with you. What role are you playing personally, not just with the most recent event, but what's going on in our world? And then what role was your Y playing? And both y'all can answer that.
Okay. Well, I will share that for a community that is not very diverse, it opened the door to some very meaningful conversations. Really around what's happening here, what's happening in our country, and really how can we do a better job as a YMCA and as a community to make sure that those things don't happen, or at least our doors we're welcoming, and we are looking at addressing equity in our practices and in our policies. So it really was an eye-opener. It started the conversation even at the board level, to start to look at our makeup, to look at what our board looks like, to look at what our staff team looks like, to make sure that we are a better representation of our community. And so it was exciting that they, both the board and the staff were willing to, they're willing to learn, they're open to this change, and they're looking, they're optimistic about ways that we can include people. I'm getting emails and saying, hey, I think we should talk to this person. So it's really been exciting for us, and it could be something that, traditionally in the past that, at least in this community that I'm in, that they've, something that they may not have discussed before.
That's awesome. Way to go. Rhonda, share y'all's experience, and especially 846. I mean, I know something that you're doing.
Yeah, so great question, Cam. So similar to Tiffany, I believe that change has to start from the individual level, certainly, and then at the corporate level. And so for us, it's first of all looking internally to make sure that our organization, both from our staffing, our team members, as well as our board, is reflective of the communities in which we serve. We know, if you know anything about the history of Greensboro, it is steeped historically as being a city who's on the forefront of fighting for social justice and change, with the Greensboro Four, the sit-in movement that started in Greensboro, So we are, I think, continuing in that legacy, but first of all, making sure that our house is in order. So we're going about, just looking at the demographic, the makeup of our staff, of our board, looking at, we've created what we're calling an equity plan. That includes both staff and board, starting with looking at what's called IDIs. So looking at how are we measuring how welcoming we are as an organization, and using those IDIs. I forget what IDIs actually stands for. So we're measuring internally first to see what are the ways that we can become more effective when it comes to equity and inclusion. And we're also working with other organizations. So you mentioned 846, and this is a webinar series. We are partnering, the YMCA is partnering with NCCJ of the Piedmont Triad. And we are using a training and a tool that's been developed by the Racial Equity Institute. They're based out of Greensboro, North Carolina, and it's called the Groundwater Approach. And it's a 3-hour webinar that provides information on the issue of systemic racism. And it provides data. It provides, because there are some people that believe that it doesn't exist. And so it's the data is indisputable. And it's a way of stemming conversation and informing and educating people on how prevalent systemic racism is across so many different portions of our society. And so we partner with NCCJ and working with the Racial Equity Institute on, the goal is to train 846 members of our community in the groundwater approach. We were blessed enough to have sponsors to support this effort. And we've had 2 sessions. We're having 5 total. And we see this as a way of stimulating that conversation, because I think without educating folks and being a catalyst to have dialogue around this, it's hard to get to solutions. And so we have invited, there have been corporate folks who are part of this community, people from the police department, the sheriff's department, the educational sector, the governmental sector. And so we see this as it's a problem that we have to solve collectively. And so this is something we're really excited about. And we hope that it is a way of stimulating conversation and additional follow-up as we go forward. And the 846 really is reflective of the 8 minutes and 46 seconds in which the police officers on George Floyd's neck. So we use that as a symbolic way of saying that we want to support what's happening in our communities to make sure that there's equity for all.
Man, y'all two are inspiring. I hope that the CEOs that are listening to this, or even board members, that the opportunity for our wives to look at introspectively at us to see where we're at and take temperature reading. And because sometimes we don't think we have problems. We don't see where we're weak and have deficiency. So I'm proud and excited about the work that you're both doing. To talk about, y'all are, do either of y'all know the number of female CEOs in the Y movement?
I know there aren't very many.
I should have had that. I knew I was going to ask. I should have looked that up before I got on here. But there are obviously challenges. So Tiffany, did you experience any challenges climbing? You know, you got a traditional Y career climb from through the branches to district to now a CEO in another community. Any challenges of just being female, hurdles?
I believe that there are always challenges to this, but I honestly will say that my support network and those that were a part of the Multicultural Executive Development Institute and the network that was formed out of that, and the support that I had ensured that I had very little challenges. I mean, there's always the obstacles of, especially when you're going into a new community and looking into a new role, there's always the obstacle or the challenge of initially them maybe not knowing what you look like. And I can remember going into this role and asking the question at some point after the phone interview, and they were engaged and really wanting to meet me. And I hated that I even hesitated, but I asked the question of the search committee. I said, do they know what I look like? And it was, it was just something that I needed to know in their history. It's, their leadership has not looked even remote, anything remote like me. And again, the community is not very diverse. And so I think there was definitely that, that challenge of, them accepting me. And I think there is, I don't know, being an African-American and being female, I feel there's always, at times, there's that extra measure of I have to prove my ability. I have to prove what I can do. And maybe some of that's there for our Caucasian counterparts, but I feel more so that I have to, because of who I am and because of what I look like, I have to prove that even more.
Yeah. Rhonda, I'm really familiar with Greensboro. I worked for years with the High Point YMCA, and brother worked for the Greensboro Y early in his career. Obviously, you're the first female CEO of Greensboro Y. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes, I believe that is true. Yes.
Do you feel that same, you got to do extra as a female and an African American?
Cam, I've honestly felt that all my life, quite frankly. Perhaps maybe with the exception of growing up in New York City, it's a little bit more diverse in terms of the population and school that I went with. It had people from all different backgrounds. So it was a little bit different there, but certainly as I went through my college career and on to grad school and the corporate world and now in the Y, I think there's always this sense of you have to perform a little bit better because the ability that's given to you to make mistakes, sometimes I feel that you don't have the same amount of leeway as some of our Caucasian brothers and sisters. So there's always that added pressure of being the first and making sure that you're not the last. And thankfully, in when I was in New Jersey as a CEO there, I had a really supportive board. It was very difficult because that Y was in some challenges financially. So turning that around was a difficult task, but had a real supportive board. But I always felt that gnawing pressure to say that, not only do I want to be successful, but I want to make sure that the person that comes behind me that also looks like me has an opportunity. And I don't want it to be said, well, we tried that and didn't work out. And so I've always carried that pressure on myself. And coming here into Greensboro, I have a really great board who is very supportive and who is highly committed to diversity and inclusion and equity. And so that makes my job a lot easier. But I've always felt that pressure because I really honestly feel that I guess I would say the grace that may be given to you for making a mistake, I think you may be judged slightly differently. And I've experienced that.
Yeah, I think that's in your DNA, obviously, but that's probably why y'all are successful too, that you put that extra pressure on yourself to be successful. And so, way to go. You talked about, and I asked this for both of you, answer however you want to, what advice would you give young females in the Y movement, and even females of color? What advice would you give them about a career in the Y? And especially, let's put it this way, if they aspire to be a CEO someday, what advice would you give them?
I'll start since Tiffany has started all the others. Well, I am not only an African-American female, but I'm a woman of faith. I'm proudly a Christian woman. So that has been part of what's helped me along the way in my career. I believe in the power of prayer. And also, we see throughout scripture that it's relationships also that help, you along the way. No, you can't accomplish anything in isolation. So I think building a strong support network of people who can, when in those rooms, when those rooms where you may not be, who can advocate for you. So I would say having a boldness about reaching out to people that, you may want to have conversation with about how they may have gotten to where they've gotten to, because sometimes people may be a little bit shy about that. But I would say being bold about taking the initiative to reach out and speak with folks. And also, you got to do the work. So that's an important piece of it. And so the performance piece is also vitally important. But so for me, it's the faith and the works together, and building, a network of supporters who can advocate on your behalf. Because a lot of times the why, just like any other organization, it can be word of mouth that you have the ability to go into another position. I may pick up the phone and say, hey, Cam, I'm thinking I have this open position. You have anybody in your organization that might fit this? Hey, Tiffany. So a lot of things can happen by word of mouth, and it's a matter of having a little bit of boldness to make those connections and network with folks.
Yeah. What about you, Tiffany? What are your thoughts?
I echo what Rhonda has shared. It is so important, as I shared, having that network of people that not only help me with challenges that they help me probably sidestep some obstacles that that may have been in my way. And so it's so important to build your social capital and to build relationships with people that will not only vouch for you, but can be honest and real with you about the areas that you need to grow in, or that you need to work on. That is so vital. The other piece, and you also mentioned that, Rhonda, you hit it right on, is that you got to put in the work. And oftentimes there are times when I'm talking to people, and they don't even have to be in the Y or people of color. It could just be, a staff from, another Y that I've worked at, and they want to know, like, how do I advance? How do I move up? I feel, I'm stagnant. And often they get frustrated, and their work reflects that frustration. And I tell them, I don't care where I am and what role that I am in, my work will speak for me. If nothing else, if they, whatever happens and I'm moved out of the door, I am not going to not do my best. My work will speak for me. So even if there are others that are bad mouthing me, the evidence is going to be there that will exonerate whatever somebody else can say about me. And I think, again, often it's easy to get kind of drugged down and be frustrated with maybe your supervisor is not seeing your worth or your potential. Maybe they keep, handing you jobs or giving you tasks that you feel like are helping you grow. And so, my advice to them is I do that and some. Right. So I take it, if that means that, you need me to mop the floor, I'm gonna, mop it and buff it or make it even better. So my work and my work ethic are going to speak for me, so that when it's time for somebody else to vouch for me, they really can. And they know that they will. So the other piece that I would say for those that are looking to advance or to grow their career is say yes to opportunities and look for opportunities to stretch yourself and grow. As much as there are times where I say, oh, I love to speak and I can talk to anybody. And, the one opportunity that, somebody asked me what I consider speaking at, at graduation, at a commencement ceremony. And I was like, I was honored and flattered that they would even think of me, but I was so scared. What if I say the wrong thing, or what if I'm not good enough? And those are the opportunities in which you can grow and stretch yourself and look at those things that you can then add to your resume of, of things that you've been able to do. And so the next time that you're in that situation, you're more comfortable and you can continue to grow in those areas.
Yeah. Rhonda, what advice would you give white CEOs or just YMCA leadership about being a better advocate for females within the organization?
Certainly, I would say listening is a critical component because, you know, Cam, I don't know what it is to be a white male. It's just the same as you don't know what it is to be African-American female. So I think listening and having empathy for folks and being willing in those times where things may get a little bit tight to speak up, you know, because sometimes there'll be, you know, room full and there's meetings that are going on and then people don't say anything at that time and they'll wait until they're outside of the room, you know, and encourage you and say, I'm glad you said so-and-so. Well, we need you to speak up, you know, we need the advocacy and support as well. So I would say listening, being willing to self-examine, and that's hard. That's hard for anyone to do, to take a look at ourselves and to say, okay, here's maybe a flaw that I have, and being willing to hear feedback if it's coming from a positive place from people that you trust that can talk with you about maybe there's some blind spots that you may have. And so I think having the willingness to be empathetic and to listen and to do some self-examination, I think is critical. And having the courage also in those tight situations to advocate for that individual.
Tiffany, you have anything to add?
I support and back me up. Support me,
Yeah.
feed into me, back me up, you know, be willing to have the critical conversations if those are necessary, again, on areas where I may need to improve or grow, but you know, I'm blessed to, you know, there was a situation that I, you know, had experienced, and I was so it feels incredible when when they back you, when they you know, when they stand behind you, especially not being of color, and they just, you know, yeah, you know, I vouch, I know this is what she's done, and I know this, you know, to be true. It feels great, and that I think allows for, at least in my case, I worked even harder because I knew I was supported.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Y'all are great, impressive. You know, we're leading organizations and just challenging, just this crazy world. Crazy, you know, my father's a retired CEO. He's 88, and he can't even fathom what's going on right now. He's been retired for 26 years. But there's a lot of hope. My faith too, Rhonda, says there's a lot of hope for the world, but I have a lot of hope for our movement because we got leaders like you that I get to work along the side. And from Ohio to North Carolina. And I just appreciate your time and willing to share. And I hope if everybody's listening to this, that if you want to reach out to Tiffany or Rhonda, contact me and I'll make sure and connect you because two great leaders. Again, thank you for all that you're doing.
Cam, thank you. I appreciate your willingness to have these types of conversations as well. So thank you.
All right. Y'all have a great day.
I thank you as well. Take care.
Bye-bye.